In the 1960s, the original Mini was not only an icon in the automotive industry, but one in the fashion industry too. In 1994, BMW took ownership of Mini, and in 2001 we saw the new facelifted variant of the Mini. It was completely different from what we'd seen before. Now fast forward to around 2020, 2019, and we've got the Mini Electric, a all-electric Mini, which essentially is using the same sort of form and shell of the Cooper S. Now the level 1 trim starts from around £25,000, while the level 2 trim, which you can see over here, starts from £27,000. There's also a level 3 trim, which starts from £31,000, and if you'd like a full detailed breakdown of the different level trims, do check it out on our website down in the description below. Furthermore, down there you'll find a link to our Instagram. It's at TotallyEVnet, so if you do use that social media platform, we'd very much appreciate a follow. So now let's see if the Mini has brought itself to life in an all-electric format in 2020. So let's first start off and talk about the exterior design. Now, love it or hate it, the Mini Electric is no different from the Cooper S. It uses the exact same sort of shell and very much looks the same from the front or the back. Now, you might have seen some yellow trim dotted all the way around the car and some funky looking wheels. Now, if you don't like that and you don't want to kind of differentiate yourself from a regular Cooper S, then you don't have to. What Mini Electric have done through the configurator that you can do through the website, it allows you to essentially remove all those exterior trims and even replace the wheels to less aerodynamic normal alloys, and therefore make you look very much like a Cooper S. So exterior design, if you like a Mini Cooper S, you'd very much like the Mini Electric. If you don't like the Cooper S, then you guessed it, you won't really like the Mini Electric's exterior design. Let me know in the comments below if you like the design or dislike it. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts. Now, the same could be said about the interior of the Mini Electric. It's very well Cooper S, as you might have expected. The infotainment display is a 6.5-inch colourful touchscreen display. It's very much responsive, although it can be a little bit finicky given its size and its positioning, but on the whole there's no sort of issues. In the level 2 trim, this will also pop up the rear view camera, which makes it easy to make maneuvers and of course reverse into a parking bay. Now, the thing with the infotainment system, which I'm not a fan of, is the fact that it doesn't support Android Auto. Now, while I understand that this might be coming out at a later date with the Mini Electric or even Mini's line altogether, as it's just only recently been rolled out with BMW's 2020 line, it's just a shame that Android Auto is not an option by default for a car that's essentially aimed for people in their young 20s or 30s, and therefore will be potentially using either an iPhone or Android. So if you do have an iPhone or you're using iOS, then you won't have an issue with Apple CarPlay, but for those people who have Android Auto, then you'll have to either rely on the built-in navigation of the Mini Electric, which is not something I'd recommend, or you can use your smartphone. The issue here is that there's not much space to put your smartphone. You'll probably have to mount it on the windshield, at which point it's actually quite far ahead of you and therefore might take away from visibility. Just a small little thing to note, but something when it came to practicality when I was using it, I found that was something that I felt that was very much lackluster. Elsewhere, Mini has actually retained physical climate control buttons, and here I very much appreciate it because it not only makes it just a lot more intuitive to use, it's far less distracting when you have to adjust the climate rather than tapping frantically at a screen, which some of its competitors have opted for. So it's great to see Mini has retained here, in this case, a kind of old school design. Now, keeping things simple, the same could be said about the steering wheel. The buttons that are located on it, on the left hand side you've got kind of your cruise control, and on the right hand side you've got media keys and phone and voice assistant. I will say, however, when it comes to changing tracks, I do find it slightly odd that there's up and down arrows and you have to do 2 button presses to skip or previous a song, whilst other competitors will just have a skip and previous button which instantly does that action. So I'm not sure why Mini have integrated that, but I'm sure there's some sort of logical reasons behind it. As for the instrument cluster itself, it's a digital display, and there's no complaints here because not only is it very clear and bright and easy to see, but it also provides the key information that you need. For example, the power that you're using, if there's any issues. So for example, if a door is open on the side, and gives you a digital speedometer and also your battery indicator. Now, in terms of practicality, at the front of the cabin there are some storage spaces at the front and by the doors, although you can only fit a 500 milliliter bottle, at least 2 of them, at the front. front, whilst on the sides, on the doors, they're very much limited to, let's say, putting your wallet or purse and some change, whereas you can't store a water bottle of any sort on the side, which isn't much of an issue, but just worth pointing out. There's also a singular USB socket at the front here, which allows you to connect up to, let's say, if Android Auto support comes up, or Apple CarPlay, and there is a 12-volt cigarette lighter if you want to, for example, put in a dash cam. In terms of the center console storage itself, the small little armrest again is very small, but it does allow you to store, let's say, sunglasses and some credit cards. And if you were to reveal it, underneath you've also got a little compartment which allows you to essentially again place, let's say, a wallet or purse. Now, on the note of practicality, here we're at the back of the cabin, and you can see it might seem a little bit claustrophobic, and that's truthfully is because that is the reason. Now, before jumping into that, it's worth knowing that the Mini Electric does not come in a 5-door variant. It's only a 3-door hatch, so therefore there's no easy access in terms of for your rear passengers or occupants. Instead, you're going to have to rely on moving the seats forwards each time someone wants to come in and out, and therefore, let's say if you have a child seat, I think you'll find it's pretty inconvenient, to say the least. Now, as for headroom and legroom, at the back it's very limited in terms of headroom. I'm just under 6 foot, and legroom, it might seemingly look like I've got quite a bit of space over here where I can extend my legs, but in reality that's because the front passenger seat is actually shoved all the way forwards. If a normal human being was to sit over there, it would mean that I am pretty cramped in, and therefore it doesn't lead to a comfortable experience. The same could be said about the seats, which are actually very hard, and after driving for around 2 hours straight, what I found is that my lower back was actually hurting. It's actually one of the stiffest seats I've sat on, aside from a racing seat or a car that's actually made for driving around the track. As a result, it means that this Mini Electric is really not made for long distance drives, and again, we'll touch upon this in terms of the range of the car. Now, on the plus side, there are cup holder spaces at the back. You've got 3 to choose from, although there's no USB socket, and you've also got drivers at the back in terms of the audio system. It's worth knowing that the Mini Electric, at least level 2 and 1 trim, come with a 6-speaker setup by default. If you do want to extend that to a 12-speaker setup, you can do so via the level 3 trim, although that will again set you back a little bit more money. Now, here it's worth bearing in mind that the audio system comprised within Mini Electric is actually pretty good and pretty competent. If you'd like more details about it, do check out my detailed review both on YouTube and on our website. It'll be down in the description below in case you're interested. Now, very much the same could be said about the boot. It's actually limited to 211 litres without the seats down, and prop down the seats, that's 731 litres. Now, while those figures might not seem bad, if we compare it to the relatively small VW E-Up, what you'll find is the E-Up has 251 litres and 951 litres respectively, which gives the Mini Electric puts it pretty much to shame. Now, I do like the fact that they have integrated a little compartment storage here, which can be clicked in, and here you can store cables or, let's say, additional accessories that you might have. And of course, you can remove this little boot cover, so therefore it just gives you a little bit more extra room to play around with. And now we get on to driving. Now, when you do step inside the car, put your foot down on the brake pedal and switch the start-stop button, you get greeted with a sci-fi sound. Now, popping it into drive and just making sure I can just make a getaway, you can hear there's a humming type of sounds. I'm not sure if my microphone will be able to pick it up, but that's EU regulation and it's normal. It's not overly weird sounding, unlike, let's say, the Kia e-Niro, and is not as well traditional sounding as, let's say, the VW e-Up. Now, in terms of cabin noise, it is worth bearing in mind that the cabin noise is present. You can hear it through the front wheels, and the fact that the car is a front wheel drive as well. You do hear a bit of road noise creeping in from the tires, but on the whole, it's not to be overly distracted, and it's not something that I would say is a negative, to say the least. It's kind of a norm, and given the fact that you are in a super silent cabin, it does come across a little bit more than, let's say, the Cooper S, which, well, essentially due to its engine, will be a little bit more apparent to those people. Now, as we're just going over speed bumps over here, I can talk about its suspension. Now, in terms of the suspension itself, it's relatively stiff. it's to be expected again with electric cars, due to the fact that they've got a lot of weight and they kind of have to ensure that that weight is kind of secure when you're shifting left and right around corners. It's very much the same case with the Mini Electric. What I will say is that driving in inner city roads like this around Wimbledon, you do feel the speed bumps a little bit more than you would on, let's say, a family-sized SUV which has slightly softer suspension, or let's say a luxury Audi A8. But in comparison to some of its competitors, let's say the VW e-up, Renault Zoe, just to name just two out of the many competitors that got in its all-electric category, the Mini Electric is slightly stiffer than some of its competitors. Now, this does, however, have its advantages, whereby if you're going around corners at speed, what you'll find is that the Mini Electric does really grip the road very, very well. And therefore it means that the car doesn't have and doesn't suffer from too much body roll, and allows you to really throw the Mini at, well, within corners without having to worry about it kind of sliding or going off. You can even turn off traction control if you so wish. And here again, like, the fun just increases just a little bit, whereby the car just becomes even all that more responsive. The thing to note over here, and kind of like a takeaway that I would say specifically when it comes to the drivability and handling of this vehicle in comparison to some of its competitors, is that the Mini Electric is very much more of a fun car to drive. It's kind of like a driver's car, and you can see where this BMW influence has kind of come in, whereas most BMWs have got slightly stiffer suspension than its competitors and make for just a slightly better drive in comparison to, again, some of its relative competitors. So in this respect, the Mini Electric is very much the same case, and is definitely a car that I would choose if it were to driving around country roads 24/7. Now, a thing to note, however, due to it being that way, is that the car steering is a little bit stiff when it comes to inner city drives. So whereby you don't need the utmost perfect responsiveness of a steering wheel and the kind of driver's feel, the Mini Electric will feel heavier to those people who are just going to take around inner city drives. In comparison, let's say the BMW i3, which just passed there, the i3 feels just a little bit lighter and nippier to maneuver, whilst the Mini Electric feels just a little bit harder to make those corners and turns, which again leads itself perfectly when it comes to driving at speed, but when it comes to driving slowly in inner city route, you'll find it's not as much of a comfortable experience. Now, when it comes to performance, the Mini Electric will get to 62 miles an hour in just under 7.3 seconds. And quite frankly, in comparison to, let's say, the equivalent Mini Cooper S, this car is just way more fun to drive, specifically if you're trying to make a quick getaway at the lights. Now, the thing to note over here is that due to its all-electric powertrain, you do get around 181 brake horsepower, and it's limited to around 94 miles an hour, which will be perfectly fine for people living in the UK. Of course, if you're going to take it to the Autobahn, then you're not going to get the full amount of speed that you get in a gasoline variant of the Mini. But what I'm trying to say over here is that the car is very responsive and very fun to drive. So as we're just going to enter the motorway over here, I'll just put 5 foot down, and you'll see that sort of instant amount of acceleration, which isn't the same that could be really said about the Cooper S, which is, well, just a bit more sluggish. It just takes that little bit extra time to respond because, well, it's an ICE based engine. So now we're just going 20 miles an hour, just put my foot down, and we're already at 40. So it's just really responsive, and the accelerator over here is just really well done. And what Mini have been able to kind of achieve with this kind of responsiveness feel and the driver's feel of it is to be commended. Now we're on the motorway, and this kind of leads me perfectly into regenerative braking. Now, in terms of regenerative braking, there are 2 modes to choose from only. The maximum mode, which is the mode that it kind of is by default, which is kind of great to see in most electric cars, is pretty harsh. So over here you can see I'm just going to be slowing down to the traffic light, and if I just get my foot off the pedal, it slows down pretty quickly, and you do feel it, and it can come to a complete stop. Now I'm just putting my foot on the brake just to slow down completely, but it is pretty, well, harsh to say the least. Now, unfortunately, there's no mid ground, there's no level 2 mode to choose from. Instead, you can flick a switch by the dashboard, and that will not say disable it, but will make it into low regenerative braking mode. So now if I were just to put my foot down and release, I'm almost coasting. There's a little bit of braking that you feel, but it's extremely minimal, at which point that will feel more natural to people who are coming from an ICE based engine for the first time, and therefore feel a little bit more natural versus the pretty aggressive nature of the high regenerative braking mode. Let's talk about all electric range, and here is where it's my kind of biggest disappointment about the Mini Electric, whereby the car will last around 100 to 110 miles on a single charge. Now, I did talk about this before via the instrument cluster, where it kind of gives you a realistic range, which is appreciated, but equally a bit frustrating given the fact that its realistic range is never going to be that 145 miles that Mini claim on their website, and is kind of plastered all over the place with a WLTP rating. In comparison to its competitors, which offer more mileage, or if not the similar type of mileage, the Mini Electric is very much lackluster in this department. And as such, when it comes to longer distance drive, let's say we're on the motorway and we're going for a long drive, that 100 to 110 miles of realistic range is going to be really shaved down pretty quickly, and it's disappointing to say the least if in a car that starts from 25,000, in this case for a 27,000 pound car, to be lasting so little time. The car just doesn't last as long as it should do for, well, an all-electric car. Instead, is really made for a city car. Now, in terms of that city car type of approach, which Mini say that this car is aimed for those people who are going to make short journeys, and even admit to say that this car isn't really made for long distance drives and isn't a car that you would use it as a secondary car. Well, quite frankly, when it comes to inner city drives, I wouldn't be choosing something like a Mini Electric, because it's not that easy to handle with its pretty stiff steering wheel. Now, I should also mention, and something I forgot to mention in the driving section, that the steering wheel can be adjusted in terms of its stiffness via the driving modes. But here we're on the normal driving mode, or even green driving mode, which kind of loosens up the steering wheel. If I were to pop it on sport mode, it really stiffens up the steering wheel and makes it just that little bit harder to maneuver, which is great when you're going at speeds, but not so great when, again, you're going around the city. Now, on the plus side, to recharge the Mini Electric, it's pretty quick given the fact that its battery pack is relatively small, and therefore it will take around 30 minutes to 80% on a 50 kilowatt charger, so it does accept that via Type 2 and CSS ports combined. But then if you were to use it on a regular 7 kilowatt charger, which you would find normally on most public chargers or even a home charger unit, it will take around 4 hours, or just under 4 to 5 hours, sorry. But while it does also accept a 3-phase charger, so that's around 11 kilowatts, and that time can be brought down a little bit, but the 3-phase chargers are really made for home installations that have a 3-phase charger unit installed, which is not say rare, but you just have to have that installed, and it could cost a little bit of an additional extra. So what do I make about Mini's all-electric car? Well, quite frankly, there are some plus points, and that's namely due to its design, which is extremely similar, if not identical, to the Mini Cooper S. As I said before, you can remove the yellow trim and accents around, and even the wheels. But then the biggest thing for me was actually its performance in terms of drivability. It really does feel like a driver's car, which isn't the same that could be said about a lot of its competitors. The problem here is that practicality and comfort aren't its forte, where its competitors are far better and far superior in this domain. And when it comes to all-electric range, yet again here the Mini falls short in comparison to all of its competitors. With a realistic range of around 100 to 110 miles, you can't really see yourself doing long distance drives in this car. Now, of course, your mileage may vary. Literally, you might use this car as a city-based car, but at which point, why would you consider the Mini? Other than its looks, there are other alternatives to consider. So the Nissan Leaf, you've got the Renault Zoe, you've also got, let's say, the VW e-up. All of these cars not only are more practical, they're just great inner city cars, and also offer significantly longer range. So now that's my opinion about it. Do let me know in the comments below what you make about the Mini Electric. Is it a car that you'd see yourself driving? Is it a car that you see yourself buying? Or is it a car that you would truthfully just go for one of its competitors instead? I'd be very much intrigued to hear your thoughts. Now, if you like this type of review, make sure you give it a like, subscribe to see more, and of course favourite and share to help the channel grow. Now, I've been Chris from TotallyEV. Take care and goodbye.